building a greenhouse, a small greenhouse, just to have that for the winter.
Nice.
And the challenge is just to keep the plants alive during the winter time, you know, because the garage is not heated, and that's why I'm finding out other options, where to keep my plants.
And so you're talking about flowers, right? Are you, you know, any food crops at all?
Well, I have some raised beds, so they are staying outside for the winter, and I'm figuring out how to cover them for the winter as well. But unfortunately, I cannot store right now, other than in my refrigerator, or I have some like wooden baskets and whatnot. So I store some stuff there, like potatoes and yeah. But the challenge with that, if the temperature is not right, you see those little outgrown some stuff on the potatoes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Temperature and humidity we're finding.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go to Vita, and then John, we've got Jared joining us too. And then we'll go for general conversation. But Vita, sorry.
Hi, I've been looking forward to meeting you all for quite a while. My wife, Margaret, and I have a farm called Morning Glory and Bumblebee in West Amwell.
Nice.
We're not far from North Slope Farm, but we also work in New York City, so it's been a challenge for the past 4 years going back and forth. We've seen a couple of you at the conferences. In the next year or two, we hope to be able to be out at the farm. Although we don't have a house yet, we're off-grid. We have a little shed and rainwater and solar panels.
Neat.
We started out with the idea of growing nut trees and sour cherry trees. We had experience as city gardeners, and it was because of the nut trees, which are so slow, that we decided we had to get started, even though we couldn't be out there yet. So I store a lot of things by drying them, like dried herbal teas and tomatoes and things, and then I make a lot of jams and jellies and sauces. We're really curious about root cellars, but we don't grow a whole lot of vegetables, so it hasn't been a big issue keeping them. Garlic, we've had some trouble keeping garlic for a long time. We had some purple hardneck garlic that kept pretty well, but this year's garlic is softneck garlic, and it doesn't look like it's going to last much. I'd love to do better with garlic.
Is that your challenge? The garlic?
That's my challenge right now. Also, we're planning to build a barn in the near future, so what kind of a floor to make for it is a question of interest right now.
Yeah, floors are definitely a big piece of the equation. Great, that's great. So you brought in the nuts and the dried herbs and teas. We're getting good representation here. And Jared, it sounds like Jared's talking to somebody. Looks like he is. Why don't we just go to you, John? Oh wait, hang on. Let's get Jared. Because I want to let you give your introduction, John, and then we can hit you with any questions we can and cut you loose. We're not probably gonna have a super long discussion tonight, but I do want to cover any questions and any topics we can. Hey, Jared, can we get your? Oh. Okay.
Sorry, I'm doing market right now too.
Yeah, are you able to give us a little introduction? We have, but if you're not, that's
No, it's cool. Is the big picture on the call? You on the call? Yeah, he is. Okay, cool. What's up, big picture? What's going on? So wait, what's the prompt? What am I supposed to be doing?
the plot is we're curious to hear your first name, the name of your farm, where you're calling from, and then
Yeah.
have you had some experience with storing any crops that you feel comfortable with, and also do you have a question or a challenge about storing crops?
I'm sorry. Do I have experience
Storing a crop.
storing?
Choose one.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so my name's Jared. The name of my farm is Closter Farm and Livestock Company. I'm in Bergen County, New Jersey. This is the first year of our farm, and I'm currently running a market right now. So I'm kind of like looking over there and trying to help my employee run it. So if I'm distracted, I'm sorry. I'm calling from the farm, and we've started to have some really good success with our on-farm market, which is amazing and really good. Storage. So this year, I mean, we did a ton of infrastructure stuff, but one of the big ones was a walk-in, and we got tons of quotes for prefab and other types of walk-ins, and figured that it would be cheapest just to make a custom box totally from scratch. And I'd never done that before, but it was so much cheaper for the size we wanted, and we ended up using a CoolBot. So the cooling system itself, between the CoolBot and a 24K BTU, was $1,000, and then the rest of the box, all in, not including my time, was just under $7,000 or $8,000, somewhere in there. So we built a 8-foot high by 20-foot by 7-foot large box inside of our barn, and it's awesome. I love it. We bought a prefab door, so it's like 4.5 feet wide. You can roll tons of stuff through it, and we store pretty much everything besides tomatoes in there. And then tomatoes have been really hard. My challenge, I guess, is storing tomatoes because I don't have a good place to store them, so they're all in my kitchen, which is good because I get tomatoes in my kitchen, and bad because I get rotten tomatoes in my kitchen.
That's awesome. That's good. You brought the tomatoes in. We didn't have them in the mix yet.
Right. But the big picture will tell you, that's John, by the way. John from Rolling Hills is the big picture. That tomato storage is vital, and one can use a dedicated tomato storage place also as a root crop cellar and germination chamber all in one. So for a 3-for-1, it's a pretty good investment. And we'll probably end up using the excess insulation I had left over from my walk-in box to build something very similar, buy another CoolBot and a smaller BTU, and build something very similar somewhere on the farm. But if I can keep going, we're also doing chickens, and now I need to figure out if I want to do walk-in freezer or a walk-in fridge dedicated for chickens, because if I'm going to be processing chickens on farm, I'd rather air chill them than water bath them, because the product quality is so much higher, and you're not inflating, you're just not decreasing the value of your product, and they cool down faster.
Have you
so I probably have to build another walk-in.
have you had experience with storing the livestock? I don't know your past history.
This farm, no, but I used to work at Doublebrook Farm, so I did 250 chickens every week for 52 weeks. Oh, up to 400 chickens a week, plus 1,000 turkeys and ducks, and then a couple hogs every week, and cows. Yeah, I have some experience.
Okay, and you guys were doing the chickens and stuff on site?
Everything's done on site at Doublebrook. They have a fully fleshed out $250,000 USDA inspected processing facility on site. So if you're buying meat from Doublebrook, it's grown on site, harvested on site, sold on site. That's kind of the shtick.
Yeah.
I can't do that here yet because I'm surrounded by neighbors who I don't think want to hear chickens getting slaughtered in the middle of the day yet. But I'm going to attempt to convince them otherwise. And I've run the numbers 6 ways to Sunday. There's just no way you can process large scale poultry and make good money. You have to process on farm because you can just amortize those CapEx costs in your processing equipment so quickly. And ideally, I'd like to be doing about 2,000 to 2,500 chickens on our scale, which I think is totally doable in a season. But for now, we're going to a local organic processor, Goffle Poultry in Wyckoff. Talked to Joe over the phone a few times. Sounds like a good guy. So that's what I'm doing this time.
Jared, did you say 25,000 or 25?
2,500. 25,000 would be above the exemption, meaning I would have to get a USDA inspected facility. You have to be below 20,000 total birds, no matter what kind of birds you're doing, if you want to be below the highest exemption. If you're below 1,000, it's a lighter exemption. If you're below 9,999, there's an interim. So it's 1,000, 10,000, and 20,000 for your exemptions, and then you have to be inspected.
Cool. You got a lot going on.
Just a few things.
Yeah.
But we averaged over $500 an hour today, which is my metric for success at a market. So I'm pretty pleased.
Nice. $500 per hour.
And we had a local small batch ice cream vendor who really wants to use our coconut squash and squash blossoms to do like a Dan Barber style ice cream thing. So it's good. Things are building.
That sounds awesome. So I think what we're gonna do, John, ask you just to give yourself a little introduction, and if you could maybe start out with the introduction topics, and then we'll take it from there. I think we've got. We'll try and open up everybody. We can one at a time.
Cool. If my signal cuts out, let me know because I'm getting like a spotty internet connection. So just let me know. I'm John. I'm owner-operator of Rolling Hills in Lambertville, New Jersey with my partner, Stephanie. We're a small market garden style farm on just under 2 acres. We focus primarily on greens, winter production, and not a lot of root crop and winter squash storage, but I do have experience with it. And I can, talk about the crops that we grow, that we store throughout the winter. And then also, I guess, talk about the crops that we grow throughout the winter, if you're interested, because that's really a lot more of what we do. But we do also, obviously grow crops for storage.
Do you have any challenge or question that comes up for you regarding post-harvest handling?
Questions about it? Just, I guess, annoyances with our infrastructure. So just having better infrastructure for just the ease of storage, I guess. Like, we run CoolBot systems for our cooler, and our wash and pack and cold storage is outside, so it's not in a heated room, which just makes things a little more temperamental when you're dealing with temperature swings. Ideally, we would have an indoor barn so that if it dropped to like 15 degrees at night, we wouldn't have to worry about heating our cooler to just maintain temperature, because we're basically outside with it. So
yeah, the heating the cooler was a big lesson first winter, trying to get crops through the winter.
Yeah,
the heater in there, it's like, whoa, that
yeah.
I thought about that.
And then maintaining humidity with adding heat, so
That's that may be a good segue into the the moist conditions root cellar issue. Because when I was going by the means, I'm sorry, John, jumping in. Was there anything else you wanted to share about?
No.
All right, so I've made some notes about kind of what people have shared. So we'll jump around a little bit to try and touch on our challenges and pull in on our resources. So I would say if you have anything you want to contribute as we talk about this, feel free to just jump in. Or there's the little, I think there's a little raise your hand signal or something like that. Or you can always write stuff in the chat. I also want to direct you, and I'll actually write it in the chat, on our NorthslopeFarm.com page. There's a couple references, links that the county extension agent Meredith Melendez directed me to. It's information about different fruits and vegetables, what the storage temperatures are. And one thing that came right to my attention as I was looking at them was also talking about humidity. And so often with the vegetables, it was talking about like a 90% humidity, 95% humidity. And so this is related to the, and also to Vita, to your question about the floor, because when we put in a root cellar here at North Slope Farm, we didn't end up pouring a concrete floor. We left the floor bare because we wanted that humidity. And so Nagisa, that was what I was thinking with your root cellar, excuse me, is that it's probably fully intended, right, to have a moist environment. But then bouncing down to Stephanie with the mice and, you know, how to control. So the, of course, I forgot to pour myself a whiskey before I sat down for dinner, for our Zoom tonight. But let's see. So questions, let's go to that point. Did anybody have a specific question tonight? Andrea and Vita, we you know, we put out the topic. I don't know if you were coming tonight for that topic specifically, or anybody was there as much as just to get together as anything. So I wanted to comment that Jared up at Clouster Farm is in the Journey Person program with NOFA, which is an effort by NOFA to try to capitalize on the fact that we've got experienced farmers within the community, and we want to connect them to other farmers that are engaging in the activity. And so John from Rolling Hills is serving as Jared's mentor, which is, I think, sounds like it's been pretty good. And John, I guess I want to jump back to you as far as the topic of growing through the winter, because I think that's, if you could just tell us a little bit about your experience with that. I don't know how many years you guys have been going to winter markets now with fresh crop, but if you could maybe share a little bit of your, you know, your experience with growing crops in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm. I'll give you like a lay of the land for what we do. So for storage crops, so we grow year round, and then we in conjunction with growing year round, we do have the storage crops that we sell throughout the winter, but it's a small aspect of what we do. The crops we sell throughout the winter that are stored include cabbage, beets, carrots, and daikon radishes, and then celery. Most of the root crops we just harvest out, you know, at or around frost time. The radishes we want to get out before the frost, but the carrots, they can endure the frost. And we kind of just pick them out at our convenience. Cabbage, obviously we get out before the frost, and celery we get out before the frost. Celery was a crop that we didn't really know we could store. And that the storage requirements for celery are different than the storage requirements for the roots. Root crops we're keeping, we actually use the sandbags that they sell at Knowles. They're the woven sandbags. They only hold about 25 or 30 pounds. I've seen other farmers use the big satchels from Uline that I think can hold up to 50 pounds, but we just have the sandbags from Knowles at our farm, so we use those. We wash everything before it goes into storage, except for the celery, because we want the celery to be stored as dry as possible. We've done experiments in the past where we did a washed celery storage and an unwashed celery storage, and the unwashed celery storage was had a better lifespan post-harvest than the washed. So we tried to keep that as dry as we can in Rubbermaid totes, with zero contact, with the open air. And all of that's in our cooler that we're keeping around 36, 37, 38 degrees. And roots, they're all in satchels, and we don't have a humidistat in our cooler. We probably should, but we occasionally, if we see it's getting a little dry in there, I'll just go in with a bucket of water and just dump it on the floor to increase the humidity. And again, our celery is not being affected by that humidity because it's in our sealed Rubbermaid totes.
John, I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
Do you find any fear in the back of your mind pouring water on the ground for safety reasons or food safety reason? I'm not nitpicking, I'm just asking, versus leaving it in a bucket, or I don't know, like, is it just the fastest way?
Yeah, and also don't picture like 5 gallons of water going on the floor. It's really just like,
I was imagining just putting it on the ground.
Yeah, just some water. Everything in storage is raised on pallets, so it's not sitting in standing water. And it's not a lot. It's just, like I said, if we were more professional, we would have a bigger storage space and maybe some kind of like humidity fogger or something, which we actually have. But I've just never seen a need to actually implement it into our cold storage. So yeah, I don't know. We've yet to be inspected for for the food safety thing. I'm sure there's more I need to learn about that, but I don't see it as a problem.
The humidity question, it seems to me, is really addressed to large by the packaging. So like for us, we've seen the difference between not, so we harvest our carrots, we wash them, and then we, if we're gonna store them, we store them in plastic bags. If we're gonna use them like the next day, then we typically use like a bio bag, which doesn't seem to really hold the humidity in there as much as plastic. But so for instance, the celery being in that Rubbermaid, being sealed, I guess that's really sealing in whatever moisture it's got naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And so maintains that high humidity. I don't know exactly what celery needs, but it's cool. Thanks for sharing your experiment and end results.
Yeah, well, celery only stores for like 2 months, so.
But that's kind of amazing, right? To be able.
Yeah, but it's nice, you could sell your stored carrots in May, and it's completely fine. But celery, it's good to have just for the December, January months, it's a neat thing.
Mike, your plastic bags, do they have holes or do you seal them?
No, we basically just use, like a garbage bag from off the shelf from the supermarket. One time, my first introduction to the scented garbage bags, I got home and opened up the package of garbage bag. I don't, Al, maybe have you ever even seen it? You're like me. And bought garbage bags off the shelf for quite a long while. I was a little bit disturbed by how many choices there were. And so, at any rate, don't use scented garbage bags to store your crops in. It's nasty.
So I have another question for both you guys, or maybe more. You both wash your root crops. Do you somewhat dry them before you put them in your storage? Okay.
Yeah. This is our first year with a root washer, but we have them all in our stacked totes, and then we'll just have like a big fan blowing on them so that they're not going into the bag soaking wet. I mean, that's just what we do. I don't know. I'm sure there's different techniques, but I think for us, it's worth it to dry them a little bit. You don't get them perfectly dry, but we don't want them sopping wet. That's just us.
Yeah, I know we definitely let them drain as long as possible just to try to avoid any free water. But definitely, I feel like they're a little too wet when we put them in, but we don't hold them too terribly long. And the longer we would hold them, the more careful we would be to get them dry. Spread them out a little bit.
Mike, do you have a root crop washer as well?
No, I don't. It's one of those tools that you always think about every year. Of course, it's always when you're washing all the carrots and radishes.
Yeah.
Oh, I should have bought that this year. But then you get to the end of the year and you're like, we got to wait another year without it. But how about yourself? Do you guys have one?
I have a hose with the blue.
Do you know what the blue thing is, John, that he's referring to?
Big blue gun.
Big blue gun.
But John was saying, put it in crates and then put it under. I have like a drying table for my greens with fans. So I just put them all on the drying table with the fans over them for whenever I remember to go back to them, and then put them in the walk-in and totes.
So just in a tote, not in a bag, in a tote?
Nope, just in the totes. Also, this is our first season, so I haven't dealt with storing root crops long-term yet. So that's coming up. I mean, that'll be in the next few months. Next month, try to like really figure that out.
Maybe we should talk about
neat.
dried things like onions real quick. John and Jared and you guys also, Al and Stephanie, have offered that you've store some of this stuff. Anybody want to share sort of the things they look at, the things they try to achieve or do to store their onion crop?
Say curing your onion and your squash and your sweet potato crop is the most important first step. You know, we don't grow a lot of onions, and going forward, we're probably only going to be growing scallions. But I've grown a lot of onions in the past, and if you're not curing them well, that can really affect your long-term storage. And then for storage of that stuff, we like about 55 degrees. At Doublebrook, we had a cooler set at that temperature for onions and squash and potatoes, and no light.
So let me talk a little bit about curing, because a lot of people on this call might not know anything about curing. So for your onions, you want to put them in a well-ventilated place. You want to start with an onion that is meant for storage. And there are a lot of different varieties, and some onions will sprout early and some onions will keep until a year. And those that store the longest are Patterson and Copra, C-O-P-R-A. And if you start with an onion that is meant for storage, then you'll have a lot better luck and it will last a whole lot longer. And then you have to put it in a very well ventilated spot, which is very, very warm. So a lot of people use their unheated hoop house in the end of the summer when the sun is beating on it, or in a solarium, or in the olden days, they used to put them in the attic. That might be overheated as well. You want to store them so that, cure them so that the skin is nice and dry and flaky. And then after that, and you've done that for at least 2 weeks, then you put them in your storage area. The same thing goes for your sweet potatoes, well, not necessarily the potatoes, the sweet potatoes, the squashes, and the pumpkins, because for that, the curing process is at 85 degrees for at least 2 weeks. And that hardens the outer skin so that the bacteria do not get in. And you have to take perfect specimens of your crops. If you have any blemishes on them, then the bacteria can enter. If you have made the mistake when you're harvesting and cut off the stem, that will leave an area where the bacteria can get in. So if that happens and the rest of the fruit looks okay, then what you do is take some Vaseline and put it over the cut area, and that will seal it so that no microbes can enter. And after you cure it for a good 2 weeks at 85 degrees, then you put it in your storage area at 50 or 55 degrees. And most of these crops should last the entire winter. Now, as far as the potatoes go, you have to make sure that the potatoes are always stored in total darkness, because otherwise they'll turn green and they will not be edible. And the other thing about the potatoes is, again, you want to choose a variety that is meant for storage. A very good variety is Elba, E-L-B-A, and that will generally store without sprouting until at least March or April. So it does much better than other varieties.
Stephanie, how do you store your potatoes? Do you put them in bags, or how do you keep them?
I store them in bushel baskets. You don't want to put them in a box where there's no airflow, because you always want some ventilation. And so I put them in a bushel basket, and I don't have a tremendous number. I use a half bushel basket, because you always want to keep going through, especially your potatoes, your sweet potatoes, and your onions, to make sure that none are rotting. Because if you get one rotten one down on the bottom, it can completely destroy all of your crop. So you want to keep at it. Every time you go to take one out, you check that everybody smells okay and looks okay. And when they rot, they really reek. So you can usually tell that something's going on.
Stephanie, I'd like to ask you what you mean by 85 degrees, because certainly this time of year, it's that during the daytime, but it's not at night. So how does the daily fluctuation affect that?
Okay, so I put them down. We have a workroom down the basement, which is a fairly small room, and we put them down there with a heater so that they have a constant temperature day and night.
John, you're really particular about curing. Any suggestions? I mean, do you cure outside also?
No, we're not doing as much curing as we did in the past, but we always utilized our greenhouse. So, and to be honest, it got higher than 85 in there. But it all worked out. It was fine. It's really just, you want airflow, and, you want to make sure that, you're not just piling things up, although I have done that as well, and it cured okay. So I don't know. We had one year, first farm I worked at, where we did not cure our onions correctly, and I think it was because of a lack of airflow, and it probably wasn't warm enough.
Do you try to keep the things in the hoop house in the dark? Do you shade them somehow, or?
Not for curing,
Okay.
but for storage, yes. You don't want it just sitting in light.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question about harvest. Actually, I want to go back to onions because that's one of the crops you mentioned. I've always thought that I let the tops dry down till they're brown, and harvest them that way. And sometimes I hit it just right where I can actually braid them, and the tops are in pretty good shape. But usually I don't. Usually the tops are not strong enough anymore to braid. But I went to the onion workshop at the NOFA conference, which is another good one. You were asking me, Stephanie, good ones I went to. This year's virtual conference, and I noticed a woman there harvested her onions a lot greener tops than I do. I always thought that they wouldn't cure as well that way. But anybody have any opinion on that?
It's definitely okay to harvest with green tops. I mean, for garlic, it's really just like first or second week of July for us. We kind of have it more done. Our way of doing it is not so much by looking at it. It's more like we kind of just know it's a feel. We know when to move in and start harvesting our garlic. And there's usually the bottom half of the plant is turning brown, but if the whole plant's starting to turn brown, I think it could also be resulting in it getting past its prime and it becoming more susceptible to rot. So I'd rather harvest it earlier than later.
John, I had somebody ask questions to farmers when I'm inspecting them, but I know one big garlic grower told me to harvest your garlic when there's only 2 of the leaves are still green. So past that, then it starts to open up. And I found, I did that this year, but I didn't find it was uniform. I found some that were opened up, but majority are in pretty good shape.
Yeah, we harvested our garlic crop right on schedule this year, and we had some open and some that weren't. I think depth of planting had an effect on it. Like beds that had more water than others, and lots of other variables. So much that's anecdotal, but yeah, same experience.
I can share too from our experience. When we were harvesting our onions this year, we were having a discussion about, because the instructions were all wait till the tops brown off, but ours were like so vigorous and green and lush. But we needed to get them harvested, and the time they were mature based on their days to maturity. So we just pulled them, and I think we cut them. Because I've seen another farm just mow them off before harvest and then pull them out of the ground and just lay them on the ground for a couple days to air dry and then move them under cover. And your comment about the garlic made me think that was one thing that we've really focused on over the years, is trying to dial in when to pull them. And if I waited as long as you're saying, Al, my crop would be lost because it would be all split apart and nasty. So we actually got to the point where the first 2 leaves that dried off, after the first 2 outer leaves dried off, that's when we pulled them. And those realizing that those leaves are associated with the skins around the bulb. And that's, so it's definitely everything you need to try for yourself and see what works, for sure. But leaving them longer, we would lose a lot more crop if we let it dry out in the field. I don't know, we might have lost Jared. I was going to ask him about storing tomatoes, but John, maybe you could tell us a little bit about just handling your tomatoes and storing them, not even for long-term storage, but just as far as getting through the markets and stuff.
Yeah, so we have a tomato cooler. We're keeping it at about 68, 70 degrees. We also use it as a germination chamber, which is very important for us to germinate like all of the lettuce we grow for July and August, because in our greenhouse it's extremely hot, even with a shade cloth and ventilation. So yeah, doubling as a germination chamber and a tomato cooler. And our garlic's in there right now, actually. And you know, I've heard that it's not good to store alliums with other fruiting crops because it can affect the flavor, they say, but we're going for it. So.
Yeah, that was things on the fact sheets that are here. I'll hit enter. That are posted on the website are the relationship of how they deal with ethylene gas. Like there were some comments. It gets bitter if exposed to ethylene gas. I think carrots was one.
Yeah.
Made me curious about some. We've had various success. Some carrots are really sweet when you eat them, and sometimes they're not that great.
Yeah.
We definitely found that we had to wash the carrots before we stored them. I know, I think Genesis Farm up in North Jersey, I think they store their carrots unwashed and then wash them when they're going to distribute them. But we find for our market value, we have to wash them before we store them. Otherwise, they're kind of ugly.
That's my experience as well. I think the soil sticks to the root like glue if it's been in cold storage. I also think if you postpone your carrot harvest as long as possible and just let it get some really good frosts, your carrots will taste better post-harvest in storage, my opinion.
Yeah, well, frost generally makes the starches turn to sugar in the plant because the plant is trying to resist freezing. And so that's why carrots and beets are tasting better. Kale is terrific when it's colder rather than when you're growing it in the summer because you have all of this transformation thanks to the cold weather. But I was going to mention that, well, never mind. Go ahead.
Folks, does anybody have any questions they want to put out there on the table for discussion?
Well, let me put out what I was going to mention, which is a question. And that is when I have tried to keep my carrots in the soil as long as possible, and I've also actually covered them with straw to try to bring them through the winter. Some of the carrots have survived, but many of them have gotten eaten by voles. And I was wondering, John, if you had any problems with the voles or wireworms eating your carrots before you get to them if you're leaving them in extra long.
Yeah, so we also do a late carrot succession that we just seeded yesterday, and those will be harvested fresh beginning in December. And we harvest them through till, well, depending on when we sell out, usually first week of February or so when we do our next seeding. And so, yeah, it's a 100-foot tunnel full of carrots just waiting to be eaten by pests all winter long. And we have experienced in years past very bad vole damage where they go and they bite, the top half-inch of the carrot. And we've sold those carrots because it hasn't been a completely devastating, just more cosmetic. But for us, it's really about preventing the habitat from ever really getting established. So constantly mowing behind our tunnels, not letting that grass ever get high so that they're never feeling comfortable there. And if we have a really bad problem, I go to Home Depot and True Value and I buy poison, and it only kills them. It doesn't kill what would eat them. So it's not gonna kill a fox or a bird. And I set up they're little black traps. They're tempted to go in there and they eat the poison and then they die a horrible, probably painful death. But I've tried the mouse traps, the Elliott Coleman technique of putting that in a PVC pipe because they're tempted to go in and out of PVC, and was not really pleased with the results.
Mhm.
So I've really just stuck to the poison, and I make sure that the poison is outside of my tunnels. I do, kind of one on each corner so that they're, kind of accessing that before they go into the tunnel. And I usually wipe a big dollop of peanut butter on all the bait.
Mhm. Great. So I have problems also with the voles getting into the sweet potatoes and the potatoes before they're ever dug. And when I go to dig my crop, I might be able to pull up a handful of sweet potatoes that are 99% eaten, and there's like nothing there.
Yeah.
And so this year, for the first time, I tried putting in castor oil, which is a repellent for the voles. And I haven't yet dug my sweet potatoes, so I'll let you know if it worked.
Nice.
We'll have to post that on the NOFA social media.
Right.
Stephanie, sweet potatoes are safe.
Yeah.
Yay.
That would keep me away from them, Stephanie.
What's that?
That would keep me away from them.
Yeah.
Yeah, voles are definitely the biggest winter pest, aside from aphids. But voles can be pretty devastating.
And of course, you have to realize that if you have a greenhouse or a hoop house, that you are an oasis, because there's nothing else for them to eat. And
Mhm.
word gets out in the neighborhood pretty quickly where the good food is.
Yeah, that's why, like I said, preventative is always first and foremost. Mowing all year, being really conscious of mowing, never letting your grass get high, and then just before your winter plantings, just I put the poison out before I even have a problem, just to make sure that it's not, too late.
So, Mike, I wanted to address Vita's question about the garlic, and I don't know if this is an answer, but I could just tell you what I store mine in net bags in the basement, which is 55 degrees all winter long. It's down there now, but it's not 55 degrees yet. It's probably still in the 60s, 70s, whatever. And I kind of find that it stores pretty well until about March. And if I leave it down there after March, when it starts to warm up again, then it really starts to sprout. So at that point, if I remember, I'll put it in the refrigerator, and hopefully I don't have too much more left to take till the escapes start coming in the next year. But that seems to work fairly well.
Given what you all were saying earlier, I think we harvested our garlic too late this year, so it wasn't in good shape to start with. It was starting to open up.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens quick. You start thinking about, oh, we should harvest the garlic, and then before you know it, a week's gone by, and another week, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, well, actually, this is kind of late. It's a common problem.
So, Mike, if you look at a new topic, I'll bring one up. Is that all right?
Yeah, I was just trying to think whether we had hit all our pieces. And the one thing that was still coming up to me was the Vita's mentioning about making choices about building a barn. And I was wondering if anybody had any references that they could share, whether there's somebody like a barn, like a book that they've read, or a website, or a reference in any way for making choices about building things. Does anything come to anybody's mind?
Yeah.
No references, but we ended up pouring a cement floor in our barn to make sure that we didn't have any mice, rodents. And then of course the dogs were digging up the dirt when we had a dirt barn floor. So I think I would definitely pour a cement floor if you can.
And everyone I've talked to who has ever built a barn has always recommended putting in the tubing, even if you don't have the radiant heating installed yet. The tubes are there if you ever decide to install the radiant heat, because it's easier to install the radiant heat having the tubes in your floor, as opposed to deciding to get it, having a concrete floor that's poured and there's no radiant heating tubes there. That's the biggest piece of advice I've heard.
If you plan to keep livestock in the barn, it changes a lot of the answers that you might be looking for. I don't know if you wanted to keep livestock, but we had sheep in a barn that had dirt as the floor, and it was absolutely impossible to keep the shed clean. Whereas when we have the horses would not do well on a concrete floor. So the rest of the barn was concrete, but for the horse stalls, it was either dirt, or normally we would put down stone dust and then put the bedding on top of that, because otherwise it's too hard on the horse's hooves. So there are a lot of questions. Also, concrete is very slippery for some animals, and you would have to put down a rubber mat so that they would not slip. But if you want to keep it clean, concrete is the way to go.
Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, I just want to get back to the winter squash. I know it has to be cured, and sometimes I can't decide whether to pick it off the vine and bring it to a place where I can keep it under cover where it's not going to get wet. But there's a little bit of life left in the vine, even though it looks like it's really ripe. There's a lot of decisions to be made there, and I never do the same thing twice. I'm just wondering if anybody has any advice on that.
Well, for the winter squash, we generally harvest it when the vine dies. But at the end of the season, before the first frost, you might have some winter squashes out there that are still, some of them even light green and nowhere near being ready. But if you harvest them, I treat them the same as the adult squash. The difference being when you cook them, the taste is pretty awful in comparison to the adult squash. So don't expect it to be as good as a fully mature squash.
Yeah, we've got delicata out there, and we were going to start harvesting and the vine is still living. We harvested a couple and they tasted good. So you would say, Stephanie, to wait until the vine was dead?
Not necessarily. You can tell by the color of the squash whether it's ready to harvest or not. And if your delicata is fully colored and you have your green stripes and the background is nice and warm yellow, then it's ready. And for the butternut, if it's a nice deep tan, it's definitely ready. And the stem might or might not be attached to a living vine. So I tell by the color.
But sometimes the squash is still growing, it's still attached to the vine, and that part of the vine looks pretty bad. But there's 5 or 10 feet away, there's still a lot of green growing. So I don't know if there's more sugars being added to the squash as long as it's still green further down the vine, or not.
Well, the answer would be to harvest one that has a green vine and one that doesn't, and cut them open and eat them both in a double-blind test, and then you'll find out.
Okay, I'll come back and teach this class next year.
That'd be good.
All right. Well, I think what I'd like to do is propose an early night to our gathering tonight. We've got next month, we've got the soils. We've got a great video that's been prepared. We've got 3 farms involved in a multi-state soil grant. And so the 3 farms in New Jersey are all represented on this video, and we'll play it next month and then have some discussion afterwards. Is there
all 3 farmers will be attending, so it'll be a lot of fun.
Is there anything else on our upcoming NOFA agenda we should put out there in case anybody's missed anything?
Yeah, well, the one that follows that is, unfortunately, we couldn't do the Ironbound field day, so we're gonna do a virtual field day the following, and then we take off for the holidays. There are no more open houses after that, for the rest of the year. And then we also have Al's road to certification. And we already have 10 people signed up for that. So if you ever thought about certifying, go to Al's class. And then finally, we have a very interesting series, 3 Mondays in October and November, right up to the election, we're on grains, which will be really, really fun. We just finished filming that yesterday in Pennsylvania. And Elizabeth Dick and Henry Byler and Scott Morgan and Joel Steigman Small Valley Milling will all be presenting. It's very interesting stuff. They talk about rotating vegetable crops with grains. So you get a cash crop when you're effectively cover cropping your field, but you can actually generate a fair amount of cash off of growing a crop. So they're advocating for that, and they also demonstrate that you can do it at a very small scale or very large scale, and that there are many options. So I think it'll be pretty interesting to farmers in New Jersey. So I'm hoping people will join that. All right. Oh, I think you might be on mute. Here, let me unmute you.
Any questions or comments or anything before we say goodnight?
I would like to say it's great to meet you all, and I hope to see you regularly, and
Yes.
especially to see our neighbors near Lambertville, West Amwell in person before too long. Thank
Yeah,
you so
don't
much.
hesitate to stop as you're driving by. If you're driving down Rock Road, and yell out the window, we'll wave gladly.
Thank you.
All right. Have a nice night, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.